All right, we are back with part two of the Thomas Fitch Sports Show. And the only thing I didn't get to mention the last time was Michael Dixon, who really did a good job of furthering his Heisman resume. To me, this might have been his most impressive game so far. He averaged 50.3 yards per punt and had a 33 and a 34-yard punt, which the only reason they were so short was because he was having to punt from, the 35-ish yard line. And he had a great punt. I call it a pooch punt, and you see when he kicks it, he barely touches the thing. But, it was a better throw than probably Ellinger or Bouchel could have made. Running down the sideline, maybe Chris Boyd. Someone catches it right at the one. And it's, when he kicks it, like he had a 67-yard punt, when he does that, it's impressive and it's cool to see. However, what I think will impress NFL coaches is the fact that not only can he boot it and kick it really far, but he can also have touch. And he is great at having touch and getting the ball to land right on the 1 yard line or right inside the 5. And that, I think, is what's going to help his draft stock more than just being able to kick it really far. Because in the NFL, it's great if you can kick it really far, but sometimes you got to be able to have control because otherwise you'll outkick the coverage. And so clearly he shows he can control how far his kick is. It's not like he's just kicking it 60 yards into the stands. He also had his first punt of the night. He's going straight into the wind, boots at 60 yards. So really, really just an impressive performance overall. I think his 67-yard punt, I believe it was in the second half, I think that just about seals the Ray Guy Award, which, by the way, if you have not voted, there is a link in my bio. Make sure to go and vote Michael Dixon for the Ray Guy Award, because if you watch the Alabama game, actually, this might have cost. So J.K. Scott from Alabama, he's the Alabama punter. Also, he holds the kicks for them. And sorry, in the game, they were going for a field goal, and he fumbled the snap. I've never seen Michael Dixon fumble the snap. So what that says to me is that should absolutely take him out of consideration for the Ray Guy Award. Not to mention that he's only averaging about 43 yards per punt. I don't know how he's in this conversation. Probably just because he plays for Bama. But this award should absolutely go to Michael Dixon. If he doesn't, it's a travesty and somehow got rigged. Anyways, that will completely finish Texas football recap for the 2017 season. But let's go and talk about the college football playoff a little bit, because there were some upsets. Auburn defeats Alabama. Pitt beats Miami. And so let's see how this will shake up my rankings. What I would do, I would put Clemson number 1. They just jump up. OU jumps up to number 2. Wisconsin to number 3. And Auburn finishes out at number 4. I kept Bama at number 5 just because, A, they're Alabama, and I know that the committee would like to reward them for being Alabama. I know they like to do that. But also, they only have one loss. And I think it is fascinating the way that this committee works, because they were talking about this today on Pardon My Take, but they were saying Bama could be favored against every team in the college football playoff and not be in it, just because they didn't win the conference. And so it is crazy how big that loss to Auburn was, because that, even though they have one less loss than Auburn, they're not getting a chance to play for the SEC championship. So and then I put Georgia 6 just because, again, Georgia beats Auburn, they're in. So you look at the scenarios. Miami would be 7. They play Clemson on Saturday in the ACC championship. Again, if Miami beats Clemson, they're more than likely in. Which I would almost argue to put Alabama ahead of Miami if Miami was to win, just because even though I haven't been super impressed with Alabama, I've been less impressed with Miami. And so I don't think that'll happen because, again, as we've seen in the past, college football playoff voters, they like to reward winning the conference championship. But I do think Alabama is a better team than Miami. But OU plays TCU. I don't think TCU really has any chance to make it in with 2 losses. They need a lot of chaos to happen, which I don't know how possible it is to happen. Wisconsin, they just have to beat Ohio State. And, I think I don't think a lot of people are giving them the credit that they deserve, but Wisconsin is a good team, and this Ohio State team, I don't know how healthy JT Barrett will be, even though Haskins looked good against Michigan, which is impressive, and it would be hilarious to see Ohio State make it questionably into the college football playoff with a backup quarterback like they did in 2014 when they won it all. But we'll see. Ohio State probably they could use TCU to beat OU. That would help them out. Anyways, I don't think anybody else really has a chance. Bama, for them to make it in, they would need TCU to beat OU, and I don't know. I think they need that. They need that to happen, and they need Clemson to just blow out Miami. So, anyways, that'll take us to the end of college football playoff talk. Let's get to some questions. The first question here comes from Darby Drew. Thoughts on the UT Duke basketball game? Well, I want to talk about not just this game, but also the UT Gonzaga game. Both games where Texas lost in overtime. Against Duke, Texas blew a 16-point lead. Against Gonzaga, Texas came back from down 21 to tie it. Both games show that this is an improved team. It's a team that can hang with just about anybody. But one takeaway is Mo Bamba. It is crazy. You look at the difference between Marvin Bagley, who was the number 1 overall recruit, who plays for Duke, and Mo Bamba, who was the number 2 overall recruit for Texas. Marvin Bagley looks so much better than Bamba. He scored 30 points against Texas, then 34 against Florida in the PK80 championship game. Compared to, you look at, Bamba is a great defensive threat. He's kind of this freak athlete. Texas loves to get these freak athletes who do nothing for the school and then go pro and play really well. Look at Miles Turner. I think Malik Jefferson, even though he plays football, I think he's a good representation of this athlete who really needs somebody to kind of focus his athleticism on playing well. But Mo Bamba, he's great defensively. And you see how good he is defensively because he goes out because of foul trouble, and that's how Duke comes back in the game. They start to be able to score again, and so that's what he adds to the offense, to the defense. But the offense, the only place where he can score in the offense is kind of on putbacks. He can't post up. He has no shot yet. And he's just kind of awkward. He gets the ball and he turns it over, or he makes a terrible shot. The only thing he's really good at is putting back rebounds, which is fun to watch. But in the Gonzaga game, you look at overtime started. Texas gets a quick dunk, gets a stop on the defensive end, gets the ball back, gets it in the paint to Bamba. He dribbles it off his foot, and they drive down. And then Bamba gets the foul, and they make an and one. And the game was over after that. Gonzaga gathered all the momentum that they had lost and went on to win. And so the hope for Texas is they shot about, I think it was 17% from the 3-point line against Duke, and still were in a position where they should have won that game. Mo Bamba still needs a lot of development, and this is a team who almost beat the number 1 and the number 14 team in the nation. So you look at that and you say, if Shaka can be a good coach and can develop this team over the season, it is a team who I could see having a good run in the tournament. The thing that worries me the most, and this is just going off historical stats, which I hate to look at, but statistically and historically, offensive teams are the ones who make runs in the tournament. Texas is not an offensive team. We came back against Gonzaga because we went to the havoc full court press and we're able to force turnovers and get transition points. That is how we score. We started to stall in overtime because we slowed it down and weren't able to score. And when you stop forcing turnovers and you stop being able to get some sort of steal or some sort of block and forcing a transition move, that's where the scoring stalls. And so Shaka is going to have to find a way to get the team to score better. Right now, Andrew Jones is the only player who I trust from the 3-point line, and he's not even the best, but he had the clutch game tying three at the end of, or to force the Gonzaga game to go into overtime. So, the question there is can we become more of a shooting team? Because at this point, the shooting is the exact same as it was last year. The only difference is the defense is better, and it helps that Bamba and Osakowski are such a threat in the paint, but they need to be developed. Anyways, next question is going to come from David Brandenburg. So his question says, not exactly Texas related, but I'd like to hear your opinion on the playoff committee. You think it should be 8 teams? How can a team like UCF call themselves an NCAA D1 program but have no chance to win the national championship game even after a perfect season? So this is something that I really like to talk about because I really like the idea of an 8-team playoff. And so I think the way you could format it a couple different ways. You could either say the top 8 teams, but again, at this point, UCF would not be in the top 8 teams. So you could do the top 8 teams. One thing I would like to see, but it could make some people mad, is say the Power 5, every Power 5 conference championship or champion gets in there. And so that would be a little bit questionable this year because you could get an Ohio State in there. But again, Ohio State would be in the top 8, but you could get a team like USC in there or whoever, something like that. And so that could frustrate a team like Alabama who might not make it. But again, you would have the top 5 teams or the Power 5 conference winners. Then you would have your top non-Power 5 team in there. So that would go to UCF this year. And then that would leave 2 spots for at-large bids. So you could get maybe Clemson and OU, Alabama, maybe Clemson if they lose, or Miami if they lose. So something like that. Again, it wouldn't be a perfect system. I would say the flaws in that system is you're adding 3 more games to the season, which could not be the greatest as far as player safety. But I do think I think only 2 teams are playing 3 extra games. The other thing, while I do think that it might bring extra revenue for NCAA, because that's what I've been saying is, who wouldn't want to watch an 18 playoff? I feel like that would bring in a whole lot more ratings. But as far as attending these games, it would cost a lot of money to have to go to 3 different games, and these aren't going to be cheap games. So one solution I have to this system is that you could have the top 4 teams host a playoff game at their stadium, and that way you can have more of a chance to get more teams, or that way you can get fans, to the games, which is closer, and not make them have to travel as much. But other than that, I really do like the idea of an 8-team playoff. Unfortunately, I think I believe it's about 2020 when the 14 playoff is in a contract until. And so what that means is at this point, we're going to have to wait till then to even have a chance of fixing the system. And from what I can gather, I don't think, as far as the people who are in charge of that, I don't think there is a big desire to try to add more teams. I think they like the 4-team system. But like I said last week, 8 teams, or the 8 and 9 team, there's a lot less debate over them versus your 4 and 5 team. And so that's why I think, and maybe you don't even have to say the top 5 or the Power 5 conference champions. Maybe you just say the top 7 and include a non-Power 5 team as long as they're undefeated or maybe have 1 loss. Because again, you can get in trouble if you say you have to put a non-Power 5 team in there and your best Power 5 team is like a 12-2 Memphis or something. So that is where you can get in trouble. We're running out of time for part 2, but we have our first ever part 3 coming up. We're going to have some more questions. We will be right back. All right, we are back. You're listening to part 3 of the Thomas Fitch Sports Show. We are answering questions. We have our final questions all come from Wade Adler. First question is, who will A&M hire for head coach if Jimbo Fisher wants to stay at Florida State? Well, all the sources I've seen say that Jimbo Fisher will likely go to A&M. However, if he wasn't to go there, or even if he was, I think what would be the smart move for A&M is to hire Chad Morris, who is the SMU head coach, and that is smart. Just be Jimbo Fisher, he might, and from what I've heard, he might be leaning on leaving Florida State. But for Chad Morris, he's going from a non-Power 5 school to an SEC school. For him, I think it would make sense for him to leave. Although, you look at Jimbo Fisher, why is he going to want to go from, granted this year it's not their best year, but, almost always they're a national championship contender, or at least contending for the ACC, to go to A&M, who has struggled even getting good recruits to win in the SEC. I don't see why he would want to do that, but they could offer him a lot of money, and what I'm seeing is that they would offer him like a 5-year, $7.5 million deal. They'd offer him a lot of money, but I think it could be a waste of time. I think the smart move is to go with an in-state guy who knows the recruiting, knows the high school coaches, but they want to get the big name. And we saw what happened when Texas wanted to get the big name and get Nick Saban. And although it was Chip Brown who blew the whistle, and we should have gotten Nick Saban anyways, but we had to settle with Charlie Strong. So there are definitely some pros, but also a lot of cons to going after the top coaches. Another question from Wade Adler: how many years before Texas is a national champion? Well, I think for me to answer that, I'm going to have to wait till after next year. And the reason why is it's hard to grade a coach after 1 year. I think this next year, if Charlie Strong can get to 8 or 9 wins and can have either Ellinger, who's starting to look like he's going to be a good quarterback, or Cameron Rising, someone like that, if you can develop a quarterback, continue to grow the defense, and get a good offensive line, maybe win 8 or 9 wins and contend for the Big 12 championship, then I think a national championship is 2 or 3 years away. But if he, has another 6-win season, even maybe 7 wins, and the Ellinger doesn't look good, you bring in Cameron Rising and he doesn't look good, and all of a sudden he's struggling in recruiting, then all of a sudden what happens is, Herman gets on the hot seat. You got to find a coach who wants to come into this now toxic Austin atmosphere. And if that happens, now you're looking at who knows how long. And at that point, you're kind of grasping at straws, trying to get maybe some non-Power 5 coach who can maybe take you to a national championship. Last question comes from Wade Adler again. Where will Todd Orlando go if he leaves this year or next year? So I really think the smart thing, and I talked about this earlier, but I think the smart thing for Todd Orlando to do would be to stay. And the reason why is he could leave and go to, say, a UCF, who's likely to lose Scott Frost, maybe an SMU if they lose Chad Morris, or one of those teams, a non-Power 5 team, and try to work his way up. He could do that, but there's the threat that if you do that and, you're a bad coach, well, now you're back down to working your way up as an offensive coordinator, or as a coordinator. However, if he's to stay for another year, maybe 2-3 more years, and the defense continues to do well, now, he's looking at getting a job at a Power 5 school. I think he would be a great SEC coach. And so if he can stick around a couple more years and continue to improve the defense, I think, you look at one of those teams, maybe Florida doesn't like their coach, and maybe Dan Mullen is, although I think Dan Mullen will be a great fit at Florida, but Tennessee is having some chaos with finding a new coach. So you might see if Tennessee doesn't like their coach and they're having to fire him or whatever, I think he would be a great SEC coach in the long run. So I think he does stay this year. I think he realizes that it's a new program. He's got to stay and help build it up before he leaves. He's got to continue with his recruits, but I think give him 2 or 3 more years, unless the defense starts playing poorly. I think 2 or 3 more years, and he'll be with a Power 5 team. Anyways, that is going to bring us to the end of the show. I'm not sure when we'll be back. This is the season finale, likely after Christmas break. Hopefully, if Texas can start winning more, I'll do full shows on that. But maybe we'll do some more NBA talk, and we'll probably do maybe like a special show before signing day. Anyways, from the Thomas Fitch Sports Show, have a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year's. I'm Thomas Fitch. Let go of everything.